Hello and welcome. In this tutorial we're going to continue looking at the sound sensor and capturing data using it. As you can see, my microbit is connected up to pin 1 still, and the sound sensor is connected from the sensor board. When I download and if I play some music, you can see that the microbit LEDs reflect the changes in sound. We're going to do something a little bit interesting with our data. You may have noticed that we now have two buttons here, Show Console Simulator, which appears quite often, but this other one called Show Console Device. Now, Show Console Device turns up when my microbit is paired and when I use this plot bar graph. It also turns up if I use some of these serial blocks like serial write number. We're not going to deal with those at this time. If I start the Show Console Device and then start playing the music, you can see that before I started playing the music, the sound lines were about here, and that's about halfway between 157 and minus 174, and that's about 0. When we started playing the music, you can see that the sound waves peak both above and below our 0 range. I want to do some stuff with this data, so I'm going to download it. If I click this button, it will export the data, and as you can see, it exports it as a CSV file. So if I then go and open that file, here is my data, and as you can see, there's quite a bit of it. Some of the data is negative numbers and some of the data is positive numbers. Let's take a look and see. What I want to do is I want to make sure that there's as many negative numbers as there are positive. And if I just go back for a moment to here, I can see that there's a bunch of numbers below the line and there's also a bunch of numbers above the line, but are they about even? In other words, has my maths here done enough to get the base level when there's no real sound at about 0? We're going to use the Excel spreadsheet to work that out. So first I want to separate out the negative numbers from the positive numbers. So I'm going to put a formula in. So if I read my formula, it's saying if B2, so if whatever is in here is less than or equal to 0, in other words a 0 or a minus number, then put the value of B2 in this cell, otherwise put nothing. If I click tick, I should see a -9. If I drag this down just a little bit by clicking on the little green square in the corner, you can see that only the negative numbers appear, and that's what I want. So I'm going to drag that all the way down to the end of my data. So now I've separated out the negatives. I now want to separate out the positives. In D, I'm going to have a similar formula to this. So I could probably copy that formula and just go into D, paste it, and now I want it to be, instead of less than or equal to 0, I want it to be, let's say, greater than or equal to 0. I don't really mind if I double up on the zeros, and I press tick, so it doesn't appear there, but if I go down a few, you should see that the positive numbers appear, and they do. So if I drag this all the way down, I can see by looking at it that there may be a few more negatives than positives, but we can do a little bit of an average to find out. So equals average, and choose the range, which was C2 to C687, almost -30. And if this is +30, then we're about right. And it's about 27 and a half, so I say about 28. So they're fairly close together. So I'm happy with that. It means that my formula for working out the middle is about right. So if now that I've got this data and I've separated it out, that's what we can do with it. Just one simple thing is if I choose just column B and I say that I want to insert a recommended chart, it will give me a type of chart. Okay, here it is. This one will do, and I'll just say OK. If I drag this out, I have a good representation of what the sound was like. I can tell that at this point, at about 2:35, the music started, and I can tell that at about this point, 604, the music stopped, and that could be useful for some further analysis. If instead of this chart, I decide, okay, well, I want to graph this data, I can go and choose a recommended chart again. And here I have the data separating out the positive and the negative numbers in a way that's a little bit more explicit. So we've taken a very simple look at capturing data using the Show Console device to look at our data in real time, then capturing that data, downloading it, putting it into a spreadsheet, doing a little bit of maths on the numbers to separate out the negative and the positive numbers. We've seen that the negative numbers and the positive numbers average really very close to each other, so I think that our formula here is about right. That means I have a pretty good mid number that I've created by using this little formula with minus 511 to get the quiet sound at around a 0 point. So I'm happy with what I've done. Now remember, this is just looking at the data which is related to sound. If you wanted, you could also graph data based on the temperature and graph data based on the light levels. You don't have to do it in this way where it is sampling hundreds of times every second. You could put in a little pause so that it doesn't sample quite so often. In fact, you could get it to sample just once every minute for the length of a class or whatever. Over the course of a day, you could sample once every hour, and the students could look at this graph data that gets captured and do some analysis with it using a variety of sensors. Anyway, thanks for watching.